Welcome back, dear students, to this new lesson on the chapter operating system. As you can see, today we are looking at operating system interfaces. In the last lesson, we saw the different categories of operating system and the examples and some key properties of each type. Okay, almost all operating systems have a user interface, and this interface can take several forms. Remember, a user interface, as you saw in ordinary level, is simply where the user interacts with the operating system. That is where the user gives orders to the operating system and how the operating system replies, either by providing the output or providing the steps and all the rest. Okay, the first one that we are going to see is the command line interface, also known as a text-based interface. With a command line interface, the user interacts with the computer by typing commands. That is, you are interacting with the computer by with the use of commands. An interaction with a computer using a command line interface usually follows these two steps. The user types a command and the computer carries out the command and displays its result. That is how it is in command line interface. That you type a command, from there the computer replies by providing you the answer to your reply. That is how it works. This is an example of a command line interface. As you can see, you just type a particular command and the output is being given to you. Here it is only text that you are going to see. That's why it is also known as a text-based interface. An example of operating system with command line interface, we have Unix, Windows, Macintosh, Arch Linux, Gentoo, FreeBSD, and MS-DOS. And MS-DOS is the most known as the command line interface. And for in case it was not precise among the type of operating system, MS-DOS is a type of operating system which is monotasking, that is, perform only one task at a time. The advantages of command line interface: experienced users can perform flexible, powerful custom commands using command line interface environment to complete useful work and can chain commands together. Yes, what are we saying here? You realize most of the hackers, being ethical or non-ethical hackers, the most powerful among them always do their work through commands using the command line interface, because the command line interface is not only flexible but it's also powerful. And when we talk of the fact that you can change commands, it is that in the graphical user interface, for me to paste a particular file from one folder to another, I need to open a folder where the file is, I need to copy, then I open the other folder before I paste it inside. Whereas in a command line interface, with only one command, I can perform all the three at once. That is, I can perform the copying with only one command. That's what we say we can chain commands. That is, I can hide a command that perform many functions at a time. That is what we are talking about. That's why we say it is flexible, powerful, and with it you can chain commands together. We also have adding new command does not require a redesign of the whole interface. Exactly. Those of you who were used to Windows 7 and Windows 10 realize that the new functionalities that are in Windows 10 and the ones that are in Windows 11, a lot of property, the design has been changed in order for you to have access to those new properties. Whereas in command line interface, for us to if a new command is to be added, there is no need to redesign the whole interface. Another advantage is that command line interface requires less system resources such as hard disk space, RAM, CPU, and GPUs and GPU time than in graphical user interface. So this stands for graphical processing unit and this stands for um, graphical user interface. So with the command line interface, it will require less amount of system resources. Another one is that command line interfaces generally allow experienced users to work faster than graphical user interface users. That is what we are talking about. The person that will just write a command and perform a copy will always be faster than the person that will open the folder, copy, open the other folder and paste, always. Another one is that command line interface allow for automation using scripts of written commands. The disadvantages of command line interface we have: users require training to understand the commands. For those of you who are using the Linux command line interface, you all know that there are a lot of commands that you need to know in order for you to actually use Linux to a full potential. Users will generally need to memorize command line commands. Yes, as you know, because there is a particular command for performing each particular function, and for you to perfectly go through the computer and perform the varieties of functions, you need to memorize a lot of commands. Another disadvantage is that it is more difficult to present the user with options for command. That is, if a particular user wants to be trained on a computer and you propose him a command line or graphical, you could propose the command line interface or the graphical user interface, almost 90% of the user will choose to be trained through graphical user interface. Now, as we're talking about, this is graphical user interface, the second type of operating system interface. With a graphical user interface, the user interacts using pointing device like a mouse. The most popular form of graphical user interface is a Windows, an icon, because this is a Windows. As you can see, this is a Windows. When we talk of an icon, for those of you who are following us, realize that for you to open Dev C++ to perform a programming, there is an icon you are clicking on. When we talk about the menu, we all know that for when you're on Dev C++, you click on a particular tab, the menu appears, and you also have a pointer because this is a pointer, as you can see. The user interact with such interface by using a mouse, the keyboard, or a touch screen. Yes. So with a command line interface, we interact only using a keyboard, but with a graphical user interface, we interact using a mouse, a keyboard, or a touch screen because a touch screen is a combination of mouse and keyboard. Okay. This is what we call a graphical user interface. This is the windows, as you can see. These are the different icons, as you can see. This is the pointer that I'm using. It's just that here it is a sort of puzzle. I cannot actually identify the pointer on this screenshot. And the menu, if you come and click here, for those of you having Windows 11, if you come and click here, Windows 10 or Windows 11, if you click here, you will see the menu. That is what we are talking about. Example of operating system with graphical user interface, we have Linux, we have Windows. So we realize that Linux and Windows are both graphical user interface and command line interface. So the user can interact with both systems either through graphical user interface or through command line interface. But I will advise you, for those of you who want to go into Linux, I will advise you to be trained through the command line interface because knowing the different commands on the Linux makes you a powerful computer user. We have the Macintosh operating system, we have the Chrome operating system, and we also have Android. Advantages of graphical user interface, we have inexperienced user will find a graphical user interface easier to start with, and it is something very true because it is just like the disadvantage of command line interface on the fact that it is more difficult to present the user with options for commands. Another advantage is that good graphical user interface can often be used intuitively and commonly have built-in support readily available. That is, when we talk of intuitive support, there are some of us, yes, I include myself inside, there are some of us that when you open a particular program, just from the way the icons, the design of the icons, you can already know that this particular icon is help us to perform this function, this icon help us to perform this function, and so on and so forth. Just like here, when you look at this, you know that this plus like this represent something for security like medicine. So somebody will if you ask somebody to identify an antivirus here, he will directly go in for this one, which is something, it's an intuition, and that is what is peculiar to graphical user interfaces. We also have that graphical user interface are best option if you are choosing solution if your solution requires graphics, e.g. image or video editing. So for graphic designers, user interface designers, web designers, the best option to use is a graphical user interface because you need to see the graphics with which you are working. Another advantage is that it is easier to present the user with options for commands. No, here is it is easier to present the user with options for the different icons and their function as compared to this one. Okay, graphical user interface often provide hints as to what element do through careful use of icons, label or comments. You will realize that when you open an application like Microsoft Word or Microsoft Excel, no matter the type, no matter the application software you are using, if you just go and place the pointer on a particular icon or on a particular text, there is a particular word that might always come down that will always indicate that that this helps you to do this. You just go and hover. When we talk of hover, it means that you just go and place the pointer on it, and the hint will be displayed either below or beside, giving you the function of that particular element you are about to click on. Yes. When you want to create a new program, a new file, or a new folder on Microsoft Windows, what do? You right click. From there, you know that you want to create something new. You already have the option new. When you go on new, it directly provides what you want. So it is very easy to work on a graphical user interface for those users which are digitally illiterate. The disadvantage of graphical user interface, yes, because despite the numerous advantages it has, it also have disadvantages. And one of them is that graphical user interface commonly restrict users to one action at a time. Perfectly well. Remember that one of the advantages of command line interface is that we can chain commands together, but in graphical user interface it is not possible. Graphical user interface require more system resources such as the hard disk space, the RAM, the CPU, and the GPU time as compared to command line interfaces. Okay, dear students, you should know that graphical user interface and command line interface are the most used interfaces when it comes to operating system, but they are not the only two. We also have menu-driven interfaces where the user select options from menus. Remember, those of you, I will use a Cameroonian term in quotes. Those of you who are talking about choronkos, especially the Nokia, you realize that in Nokia, every option you are about to do comes as a menu. There's a menu for the different functions, the different tasks that can be performed. If you select messages, they will propose you a menu of the different actions you can perform inside messages. That is an example of a menu-driven interface. That is, every action, every possible action you can do is provided as a menu. In contrast to command line interface where you type commands and the graphical user interface where you go through icons. We also have the touch or the gesture-based interface. This one relies on finger movement, taps or sweeps for input. An example is smartphones and tablets. It is true that they also provide graphical user interface because they have icons, but we can also talk about the gesture-based interface. We also have the voice user interface where the user interact via spoken commands. I was shocked. It is true that I know it's an application of computer science, but I never knew that we had Cameroonians who are using it. I was shocked when I visit one of my friends and the uncle was in his office. Yes, the uncle was in his office and the uncle is blind, let me precise. But the uncle used to interact with a lot of people. But how does he do to do that? The man was using Siri and he was having iPhone 7. The man was interacting using Siri. That is, the man will be giving commands to Siri and Siri will be performing the function. It is true I knew that such was possible because I used to use my iPhone. Yes, I used to use my iPhone and say, Siri, send good morning to this person, and Siri will do that. But him was giving some type of, as if he was giving orders to his wife for her to perform it for him. So the man will say, open the message of this person, read it for me. When she will read the message, the man will ask her to reply by saying this. At the point of time, the man will be lost and the man will say, wipe everything and start back. And she will do that. I was just shocked. So we have voice user interface where users interact with through voice. And this one is something that is very useful for people that are blind. We also have the natural language interface where the users use everyday language to query or command a system. So these are other type of interfaces that we have. So in this video, I propose to you the varieties, the most used interface first of all, the command line and the graphical user interface. We saw the description, the advantages and the disadvantages, and we also went further to look at the other type of interfaces that one can go about. Remember, as we saw for Linux and Windows, that an operating system can have more than one type of interface. So Siri, which is common to iOS, you realize that iOS, that is the iPhone operating system, has both the graphical user interface and the voice user interface. I hope you enjoy the video. Do not forget to like, to subscribe, and to share for our community to grow. And why not drop in a comment, which will serve as a feedback for my team and I. In the next video, we are going to look at some concepts peculiar to operating systems such as grid computing, cloud computing, and the most important, visualization. Then from there, we shall enter inside real aspect of operating system and we shall start the journey. After the next video, we shall start our journey with process scheduling. Thanks and see you in the next video.